Hi, my name is Natalie, and I am a licensed mental health counselor, and I'm so excited to have a soulful conversation today.
Sunshine, good to see you again. Had to walk out to let you back in. Stuck in a storm of a relationship. Lost my fire. Oh, and I forgot about me for way too long. But it's rolled on. Now there ain't no shade around here.
It's Pearl Sharenza with Women's Successful Living, and you are here for another episode of our Soulful Self-Care Conversations. You can find us on the YouTube channel, all the platforms for podcasting, Apple, Spotify, Buzzsprout, everything there. So I'm so excited you're here with us today. So I want you to do this first. Take a deep breath, sit back, give yourself this next little bit of time with us together. Maybe grab a pen and paper and take some notes, because I think you're going to get some really insightful information around self-care and around mental fitness. And I am so excited to share our guest with you today. But most importantly, make sure you like and share down below and invite a girlfriend. If you're driving, no worries. If you can't take notes, our show notes will be available, so you can come back and watch it and read all the notes as well. So I want to thank you for joining us today. And again, my name is Pearl Sharenza, and my special guest is a mental health entrepreneur with sociological insight and clinical expertise. Natalie is a founder of an integrative practice recognized as an Entreprenista 100 recipient, woohoo, who helps women find authentic purpose through faith. She serves as local colleges and nonprofits while championing genuine self-discovery. And we're going to talk about her Shiro story today, and we're going to just lead where the conversation goes. So, Natalie, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Pearl.
Yeah, I'm so excited to have you. So we're going to talk a little bit how you and I met, because I think it goes to a lot of what I want to also touch base on a little bit as well. And so if you've not watched the show before, this is something new. If you have watched or listened, you know what we're about to do. We're about to go talk to the little girl, Natalie, who was probably around 7 or 8 years old and was looking at life going, oh, I'm heading off to middle school soon. What do I want to be when I grow up? And so, Natalie, what we want to know is, what did little Natalie want to do when she got older? And how does that correlate to what you do today? Like, for instance, for me, I always give my example. Growing up, I wanted to be a teacher. My people pleasing showed up in like third grade when I was around 7 years old, because my dad did 3 tours in Vietnam. So my mom was raising us. And back then we got kicked off a base. So my parents didn't own a home for a little bit there. So we'd go up to upstate New York and stay with my grandmother. And so growing up, I thought, oh, I want to be a teacher, because I had some great teachers up in upstate New York, and they just inspired me. So as I got older, was in high school, we moved to Florida. And I got to take this program where I'd go to the middle school and I'd help the teacher run, and she'd have me do some exercises and stuff with the kids. And so I really like this. But unfortunately, where I went to school, I didn't have that guidance. My parents were educated enough to know how to get me into college. So I went to school, what I call hard knocks, and grow myself up and stuff, all the amazing things I did as a mortgage broker or mortgage loan officer and all that fun stuff, as well as I was a bill collector too in my old days. But I decided I wanted to teach. So it led me to coaching. And when I look back, maybe I wasn't teaching in the respect of a brick and mortar school, but I am teaching and coaching today women how to step into saying yes to themselves and no to others with a big smile on their face without guilt. So I always have I'm probably teaching the girls that I would have had at that time when I went to school, but they're just a little older now. So that's a little bit about, for my little girl, little Pearl, what she wants to. So take us back, Natalie, to when you were little and your thoughts of growing up and what you want to do, and how does that look for you today?
I really love that you asked this question. I think it's really great to kind of think back and kind of put some of those pieces together. So when I was 7, 8, 9 years old, there were two passions of mine that I had. So one is I absolutely loved math. And I still do. So anybody that knows that when we go out to eat or we're out somewhere and they need to leave a tip, they just kind of turn to me and they're like, how much should I leave? And I've always been really quick with like numbers and understanding numbers, and I love problem solving. And the other thing that I really enjoyed was just my spirituality. I loved going to church. I loved just listening to the messages and the music, and so that for me, even that young, was really something that I really loved. So fast forward, and now I'm not a math teacher, and I'm not a pastor either, working in ministry. But I love how those two things actually have come together. So I problem solve as a therapist, and I love analyzing and just kind of seeing all the pieces and trying to put them together and help people better understand their story. And then I also incorporate faith-based components into my counseling practice. So I thank you for giving me this opportunity to really think back and kind of put those pieces together. And it's interesting how I think we're just born with these innate interests and abilities, and to see that stuff come to fruition, maybe not in the way that we originally thought, but it's really interesting to see how the paths that our lives take and how we arrive there eventually.
It, it's so interesting because it does. It's like usually when I ask this question, I think we've had one or two. It's like totally opposite what they were thinking about when they were little, right? And it's so interesting to see how it all sort of, in some way or another, does play and intertwine into our adult life, you know. And God bless you for math. I was not a great math person, even though, and my husband would always laugh because he's like, "You're a loan officer and you're terrible at math." I'm like, "It's called a calculator, dear." So, or a system that I can just plug in the numbers and it can play, you know. So he calls it pro math, Natalie. He's like, don't X pro math because it's not going to work out for you, right? So, and even my kids sort of bought into it as they got older too. But I like how you talk about like problem solving, and that's, you know, as a coach myself, that's what I love helping my clients do is like they come in and they want me to solve the problem, and
Mhm.
I coach them and let them see you have the answers. I'm just here to like pull it out and let you see it, edify some of the things you're feeling, and then help walk you through about, well, does that serve you or not serve you, you know, does that bring you joy or not bring you joy, and kind of work through that joyless. And that's when I work with my clients, it's so funny because they'll like, I'll ask them, give me 10 things that bring you joy. They're like, oh, I could do it right now. I'm like, yeah, no, it's going to take us 6 weeks to figure this out.
Yeah.
That one joy thing, I want to break it down. Why does it bring you joy? When you give me the answer, I'm going to ask you why. And it's really great because, like, when I have clients come to me and they've worked with other clients and other coaches, I mean, I'm going to ask you this if you've had this experience as well. I love to ask them, well, why are you coming to me if they've already worked with another
Mhm.
coach, right?
Mhm.
And 9 times out of 10, they'll tell me because you're authentic. I see you
Mhm.
online. I see you speak at events. I see you do these retreats. I've been to your retreat, and they say you don't sugarcoat anything, you make us figure it out and you don't fix it for me, right?
Mhm.
And therefore I know that you're showing up online the way you're coaching me, and you're not pretending to be this thing, this, you know, imposter syndrome online, and then not doing that with coaching. And I'm like, I always
Mhm.
take that as an honor because, you know, with my journey I've been through so many things, from divorcing my parents to losing my oldest son, you know, to bringing girls into my life of daughter-in-laws now, you know. So it's all these different things, and I always think it's such a great honor to when I have a client tell me that. So what about you, like when you find, you know, we talk about the problem solving and things like that, how do you walk your clients through, because they have the answers, they
Yes.
just need help guiding them, because sometimes, like, I know we talk about the little girl, right? Sometimes that little child, that inner child, has been told, don't say anything, stand in the corner, you know, you can't be
Mhm.
heard, the adults are talking, or when you get older you'll understand, right? And so I
Mhm.
think it's important that how we talk to that inner child or younger, how we address her today. So let's dive
Mhm.
into that. What are your thoughts on some of that, and how do you help your clients at problem solving?
Yeah, I'm actually so glad you asked that question because I didn't realize that when I mentioned problem solving, it probably sounds like I'm like actively taking a role in solving their problems. So I'm so glad you clarified that. I think for me, personally, the interest internally is just seeing needs and trying to figure out like how do we heal this or close this gap or fix this, and helping the client kind of figure that out on their own. So I'm glad you clarified. But yeah, so one of the things I think that makes counseling so special, and I've shared this before with just people in my personal life, personal circles that haven't gone to counseling yet and are contemplating it or thinking it, or even clients when I meet them for the first time, is that in this busy, crazy world that we all live in, I feel like it's very rare. It's interesting. We're more connected than ever before, but it's very rare to feel like I have someone's undivided attention. I am going to sit here for 45 minutes, 50 minutes, an hour, hour and a half, and I get to just openly share what's on my heart. And I have someone who isn't distracted by their phone or doesn't have any, has skin in the game and is trying to figure out what's best for them or what benefits them. It's like just someone that's going to come, show up, be very objective, very compassionate, and try to help me figure out what's going on. And so to answer that question, what does the problem solving look like for my clients? I think it depends on their needs. And so that's one of my first things that I'm trying to figure out when sitting down with a client is what do they think they need? What do I really believe that they need? And then that determines how I show up as a therapist. So I feel like we wear a lot of different hats, and you probably feel that way too as a coach sometimes. But there are times where I might be a little bit more motherly and nurturing towards someone that didn't have the best relationship with their mother, and they're trying to figure out how can I show up as a better mother or a healthier mother. And so I might be a little bit more compassionate. Or there might be someone that says, I have too many yes people in my life and people pleasers, and I just need someone to tell me the truth and be very honest and direct with me. And so I might be a little bit more challenging with them. And so I listen to what the needs of my clients are. I try to be a little bit more aware of what I think might be going on here. And that dictates how I show up and how I problem solve with them.
I love you talked about people pleasing. Like I love like the problems like you said, I'm glad we clarified problems because we're not just gonna say, oh, come and sit down and just go do this because it's gonna be
Mhm,
different for each person. There's no cookie
mhm,
cutter way of like coaching somebody because everybody is got something different they're going through. Like you said, whether they're a controller or feel like they have to control everything that happens in their life, or they're the people pleaser like me, that I'm an overcoming
mhm.
people pleasing addict. And I would tell somebody yes to anything. I was like, I could organize your sock drawer. I'd be like, yeah, let me come right now. My sock drawer is not organized. I'll help you do yours, because I don't want you to not like me, and knowing how to like set those boundaries because especially as women and then as those I call CEO moms. I don't like the word stay at home mom because you're not staying home eating bonbons and watching soap operas every
No.
day. Maybe once in a
Mhm,
while you might, do something like that, but you're typically running that household. And so I love to help my clients, especially with that, be like, you don't have to do it all. Like you can
mhm,
assign duties and responsibilities to those that are in the house with you, whether they're 3 years old or not, or and older. It's
mhm,
there's things they can learn to do. And we I think we talk more about this now. I mean, I'm 60 years young. We didn't talk
mhm,
about things like this growing up. Like my mom and dad
mhm,
said, do it, you did it. You didn't ask why, you did nothing, right? You just
mhm.
did that. And so, in fact, this past weekend I was visiting my brother and my sister-in-law, and my young nephew, and there was a conversation my nephew was having with a family member, and my nephew, like I was there, but didn't want to tell this particular person that I was there. And afterwards, I told my brother, I'm like, "Hey, number one, you don't have to protect me. I'm good.
Mhm.
I don't need to be protected by not mentioning this information that I'm around." And then two, what I shared with him, I said, "I want you to understand that if you teach him that if people are in that room, it could lead to other relationships. So take this relationship, family one aside. He could be
Mhm.
online having a conversation with somebody online and thinking, oh, I'm not supposed to let other people know I'm doing this. So it could set up,
Mhm.
and I was talking to him about how we talk to our little ones today sets them up for life, and I'm
Mhm.
glad we're in this age where we're talking more about mental health. We're talking more about how we talk to ourselves, how we talk to others, because I feel like, again, like I said, didn't have when I was growing up. And I also feel like
Mhm.
we didn't do it good during COVID. I really feel like during
Mhm.
COVID, we should have had some things in place for our kids that were having a homeschool, that were not
Mhm.
used to it, that were going to kindergarten online. And it was like they don't get that social aspect. So I feel like we're doing some catch up from that. And
Mhm.
so I love that, like you're like I am. It's like, let's talk about what's on your plate. Let's talk about what's your
Mhm.
path and how do we get you there? I think
Mhm.
that's really important. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think you bring up a really good point. I think we've come so far, and although we still have a very long way to go when it comes to talking about these kinds of issues personally within our family or households, and even in some of the larger spaces that we live in. I agree. So I'm 40 years young. but a very similar story, very similar experience, and I think part of it was my parents were, we call them the boomer generation, right? But then also, culturally speaking as well, I have to, I take that into consideration. And then also I grew up in a very religious home. So I had those three things that were kind of operating simultaneously within my childhood. And all three of those things didn't really at the time allow space for people to really talk about what they're struggling with or what they're battling. You kept things very, very private. And then also when it came to children, in a very similar sense, it was more so like the relationships weren't very reciprocal. It was more so, parents' expectations, and then the children just kind of do their best to kind of live up to those expectations. And I think because of my personality, I tend to be more of I'm also a people pleaser in recovery, but then I also tend to be more introverted, more to reserved, kind of more to myself. And so I realized that, the only way for me to be able to kind of gain the attention of my parents or gain any attention really in some of these communities that I was a part of was to just kind of push down the things that weren't so great and to amplify those things that were going really, really well for me. And it just happened to be school, academics, that kind of thing. So it wasn't until I entered my early adulthood and really kind of began working in the field that I started learning these terms and getting comfortable with really kind of speaking openly about some of my struggles. And I'll share a really quick story, actually. So I've shared the story a time or two on other platforms, but I think it relates to what we're talking about today. But I was in my grad program for therapy, and we were in a group therapy class. And essentially, it was just us running groups every week as students and just getting used to that dynamic. And one day so I was sitting with my cohort. Another student was leading the group. She asked the student next to me to disclose something that had happened to her, a personal incident. And the student said, I don't feel comfortable sharing about this because Natalie hasn't really opened up yet or shared anything. And so it's hard for me to be vulnerable and open up if I haven't really heard anything personal from her. And I remember that moment. At first, I was thinking, well, what does that really have to do with you sharing? I didn't really understand, but I learned so much from that experience. It took me a while to really kind of reflect, to think about it, talk with friends about it, talk to my professor about it. But I realized how what I thought was just the normal, typical baseline when it came to communicating and vulnerability and opening up and sharing about struggles was not the normal baseline for everyone else around me. And essentially, growing up, I think in my family would probably attest to this, but like any kind of attempt to communicate about problems or issues was really seen as causing conflict. And so for me, my thought was if I just kind of keep quiet and try to resolve these issues on my own and not really share too much, then I'm not being a burden onto others. I'm not causing conflict for others. But in reality, I was holding myself back from really healing. So that was a great lesson for me that I took away from that experience. But so since then, I've really been trying to push for that for the people in my personal circles, for the work that I do, and then the communities I'm a part of. Is I'm really trying to help people feel empowered enough to really step out and begin to kind of share some of their struggles. So I see it happening a lot more now than back in the day. But like I said earlier, I feel like we have a long way to go.
Yeah, I agree. I think we do have a long way to go, and I'm glad we're making the steps. And I just hope my prayer is we have bigger steps that come. And you and I met at the Bloom Girls. So for those that are listening and maybe not have heard about it, there's this great teacher at a local high school here called Brandon High School, and Miss Fowler, Sasha Fowler, she started this group for the girls at the school because she wanted them to step into, owning who they are, embracing who they are, and understand that they don't need these outside affirmations from other people to find their worthiness, that within ourselves we can find our own worthiness. And I when she first started, I heard about it a couple of years ago. I think this would be my third year of supporting her. During the summer, I just went and spoke to the girls, and I've watched her grow. Like I think she had like 15 girls in that room at that time, and now it's like she branched out. You and I met because she did this big national thing with, well, local thing with like 3 or 4 other high schools. And now I know that she's starting her goal was for the local PTA board to start seeing what they're doing and bring it more to our girls. And it's so important because, for me, growing up, especially as people pleaser, even in relationships when I was in high school, I was like, oh, I have to do what he wants or what my friend wants,
Mhm.
and not be able to say, oh, that doesn't feel right for me, because we weren't taught that, as we were saying, we were taught to just go along and not complain and stuff like that. So I'm watching her, now she's got this, I go every once a month. I mentor one of the girls there, and she's got this beautiful room that you can sit in. It's set up really like very serene. It's very like very wellness affirmations, and it's just such a great space. And so she has a gala. So when we're recording this, this is what we're in May. So the end of this month, in a couple more weeks, I'm actually doing the keynote speaking at their annual gala to help raise
Yeah.
funds for that. So I'm really, really excited. And I know she's doing the event again this summer. I think she's doing this summer. I can't remember when they're doing it with the school. So I'm really excited that she's that it's growing, because I think, like we were saying, we need more of this, and we need more of it for our young men too. And there's just not something out there yet. And I do. That's why I started my retreats. I do these annual pajama retreats every year in September. And this year we're back in Tampa because we're doing a prequel to our 10-year anniversary next year. But I saw the need that women weren't taking that time for self. They weren't understanding that you can step into a weekend away. Everything's going to survive at your house. Maybe
Uh-huh.
your dishes don't get done. Maybe the floor doesn't get vacuumed. Maybe the kids don't get out of their PJs all weekend. Who cares? You're taking time for self, and you're actually empowering your family to say and see that we can survive without mom being here or without you being here, even at your job. And so that's why I started these retreats. We've got one coming up this September. We have, as of this recording right now, we have 10 spots left, and so I'm really excited to continue that, to see how that grows, because I want women to understand that maybe you didn't have a voice when you were younger, but you have a voice today,
Mhm.
and you have to use that voice. You have to step into that voice, step into what I call your Shiro self. Become stronger and understanding that no is a complete sentence. That when you do, you no longer have the midnight wake ups. You could be happier and less stressed. You could
Mhm.
be empowered to be like, I am going to go away for a weekend. I am going to go hire a coach to help me like step into who I want to be. And then when all that starts coming in play, I call it, you have that radiant glow up. Like you start walking in like, I'm confident in what I'm doing. I'm glad I'm putting myself first, because then you get to be that original person that I believe God put you here on the earth to do.
Mhm.
But sometimes we think, oh, I'm going to go over here because, maybe he has this path for me to go here, but I'm going to jump over here because I think that's better for me. You always
Mhm.
end up going through the path that's already laid out, but we want to test that path. And so I know that one of the things that I ask all my guests when they fill out a form to attend the podcast with me is I ask about your Shiro journey. And yours, I think it speaks to a lot of women, because we do think bubble baths are spa and spa days are self-care, right? And they are. I'm not taking that away, but I also agree it's not just about bubble baths and spa days. Those are great things for self-care, but like you, I think it begins with being authentic, embracing who you truly are without apology. And I know you share that your journey hasn't always been easy, but like you said, it's been transformative. Like that person in that group coaching that you guys were doing, like
Mhm.
she challenged you to say, what are you sharing? And I remember when
Yeah.
I did my identity and destiny course, at the end of 6 weeks, we had to give our I am statement. I still was saying I was all my titles, mom, wife, volunteer. I wasn't, who the heck was
Mhm.
pro is what I was asked. And
Mhm.
so I know that you talked about how, early in your career, you felt like you kind of trapped by that professional woman experience, right? Trying to be everything to everybody. So I would love if you would share a little bit more of that story. I could read it here, but I would love to you share a little bit more of your
Mhm.
Shiro journey with the listeners.
Yeah, I would love to. And I want to actually it kind of connected to what you just shared, if that's okay. So you were just mentioning how as women in particular that we sometimes feel like we can't you know uh, provide give the attention that we're needing to ourselves because there's so many other things that need to get done and so many other things that are more of a priority. And there might even be other reasons why, as women, we don't put ourselves out there. As a therapist, naturally, I'm always thinking back to childhood and what that has to do with where a person is today. But I think even from a spiritual perspective, oftentimes early on, sometimes we'll say like, the enemy kind of knows what your points of sensitivity are. And so things that we might have struggled with or battled with early on in early childhood, so you mentioned 7, 8 years old, we probably battled with it maybe looked a little bit differently, it manifested differently, but battled with some of those same struggles. And then as women, we continue to battle that. So some of that might be just fear of being judged or feeling like we lived in an environment growing up that was totally out of control. And so our answer to that and solution was to be in control of as much as possible. Or, maybe we felt unprotected as a child. And so as we're a grown adult, as a woman, we're wanting to protect, but it comes across as very disengaged, very detached. And so I feel like there's a saying that says the enemy doesn't have any new tricks, and so I think that's I love thinking about it that way because when I'm working with women, I really begin to ask them about their early on experiences, and I feel like there's these common threads of just things that they have been up against or faced with from very very early on. But of course, it's just showing its head a little bit differently now in their adulthood. So I say all of that to say that my journey is very similar. Growing up. I had a few experiences of rejection that I experienced from certain extended family members and then my peers, of course. But because of like I mentioned, my personality, I was very like to myself, very reserved. I internalized a lot of that as opposed to like externalizing it and rebelling or causing behavioral problems. I really kind of internalized it and I embraced whatever it was that they were saying that I was or I wasn't. And so I found myself then wanting to portray certain aspects of myself or facets, depending on the room that I was in or the person that I was talking to. And that went way into my adulthood. And so the example I oftentimes give is I'm someone who is I'm very involved in my faith and in my church, so I identify as a Christian. But then also, I have a huge passion for social justice and for equality and equity, and oftentimes those two things you don't find them in the same spaces in the same rooms, right? And so I think we're getting a little better with that. But back a decade or two ago, that wasn't necessarily the case, and so I found myself needing to compartmentalize who I was in order to show up as my best self based off of what I thought they wanted me to be. And that caused a lot of strain, a lot of stress, a lot of tension on myself that was just unnecessary. And when I began to realize that, I'm the one that's really kind of being imprisoned by this system that I'd set up, and that I wasn't doing myself any justice. Plus, I was assuming there are probably some women out there that were experiencing very similar things. I started releasing myself from that, and that is what I would consider to be the major part of my journey and taking care of myself is realizing that I can show up as my complete self, my whole self, and that becomes more genuine, more authentic. People respond better to that. I have created much better relationships and connections with people that actually care about my whole self versus just aspects of myself. And I just feel like I live a more purposeful and fulfilling that life. Now, does that come with its own challenges? Sure, but I've come to recognize that I would prefer those kinds of challenges than what I was experiencing before, which was feeling like I wasn't really being my full self. And then the people that were accepting me weren't really accepting me for me. They were accepting me for who I was presenting myself to be. And that wasn't what I wanted at the end of the day. So that's when I think about self-care, when I think about showing up for myself, when I think about prioritizing myself, that's what comes to mind is that experience of that journey and just coming to this place of realizing, I was created a certain way. I've grown into the person that I am, and I want to I want to present that to the people that really need to hear it and really need to be a part of this journey for their own benefit, ultimately. And so, yeah, I would probably say that's my journey in a nutshell.
Well, I think it's really beautiful. I love how you like laid out too, like, how we show up in the rooms, the way we think we have to show up for that room. So every time we go in a different room, we're showing up differently instead of being ourselves. And, it reminds you of and how we set boundaries, but we let people break our boundaries,
Yes.
and I really the last probably 2 years, really, I mean, losing a child is not anything I want anybody to join this club in. The one thing I know is like before my son passed, we had a great conversation and I carried that with me. And he and my son Nate both saw me start putting myself first, doing things for myself. They had to
Mhm.
adjust to that because they're in high school and all of a sudden I'm like going, yeah, I'm not doing that for you anymore. I didn't
Mhm.
serve you well by doing that all this time and I didn't serve me well. And so as I was doing that, like before, a few years before my son passed, I had an issue with my dad and how he treated my son. My oldest was born of a heart. He was adopted and he was Czechoslovakian Haitian. So he's mixed race. And my youngest one came through in vitro. But unfortunately, my dad's behaviors towards my oldest son, as a daddy's girl, it was really hard, but I had to make a hard lock the fence boundary. And in doing so, even in doing that, like when we hear this all the time, I know you probably when you coach your work with your clients, we set boundaries for others and they're the ones who are going to break it. The ones we put it up for, they're going to break it. And so I did that boundary around my dad and my parents divorced. Like I was in my 40s and my parents divorced. So my mom, I let my dad come stay with me for a little bit. We kind of were working on a relationship before it really went south again. And I should, look at, you can't change life's not a remote, but at least I tried.
Mhm.
And so, and plus he was my dad, right? And so then my mom chose, I'm like 45 years old, to choose that because I wasn't loyal to her. And I'm like going, I'm not a little kid that has to pick sides. We're
Mhm.
all adults here. We can have adult conversations. But to this day, my mom's 80, I'm 60. My mother thinks I should talk to her and respect her like a mom and do what she says and not have a voice, even in my 60s, or in my early 40s and 50s that was showing up. And so over the last like 2 years with my mom, things she was doing and things she was saying and how behaviors, and even through using my son's passing, the things she was showing up for, I was like, yeah, you know what, you need boundaries too. And then it just got really like I started like deep diving. And what it was coaching a client who was having a challenge with their parents. And they're like, but they're my parents. And I sat there and I listened and I went home and as a prayerful person, I asked God like what I do. And, he had me say, I got right obituary to your parents. I picked your parents. You don't have to love them, as a priest once told me, but you'll always love them, but they don't have to be in your life. And so at that point, I was like, if my husband of almost 40 years was being a narcissist to me, would I accept that behavior? The answer is no.
No.
So why would I
Mhm.
accept that from my parents, from a friend, from whoever? So I made the choice that I needed to divorce both my parents. Excuse me. So I've gotten pushback on that, even when I talk about social media. Well, they're your parents, and I'm like, yeah, but that behavior is not acceptable. And just recently, like my brother and I had a conversation because I know their health, both of their healths are not doing well, and I literally said, please understand, this are my boundaries. There will be no deathbed. Come to my side and have a conversation because guess what? We're both alive right now. I have
Mhm.
forgiven them their behavior. They have to take that up when they go to the ever after. I've
Mhm.
forgiven them behavior. I don't have to accept it in my world anymore. And so I told my brother, he goes, really? I go, yeah, I promise you, I'm good. I don't need, that's for them, not for me. I've done I've done the work on that. And just recently, somebody posted on, I think it was Instagram, about the queen bee syndrome. And I was
Uh,
like, oh, have you seen that one? I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, that was so a description of my mom. I sent it to my brother, I'm like, bro, you got to look at this. Like, this is so
Mhm.
why. And so now I'm like, I save that video. So if somebody challenges me, I'm like, I want you to listen to this. Will you accept this in your world? Because, like you said, I'm no longer going to show up in the rooms for how people want me to show up. And if you're listening to us, don't do that because you're not
Mhm.
being authentic to yourself. And it's
Mhm.
okay to have boundaries. Just like I tell my clients too, I'm like, if you want to open the gate and let them back in, that's good, but make sure you hold to your boundaries. And if they don't play the game of life the way you expect them to do with your life rules, it's okay to lock them out again.
Mhm.
That's part of us being authentic to ourselves. That's part of taking care of our self care. Because, like you said, it's more than bubble baths. It's really what are
Mhm.
you doing to pour into your soul? And so
Mhm.
for me, it's been such an aha moment, and especially like I said, as somebody who was a dad, I'm telling you, I was such a daddy's girl. Like I was even
Mhm.
a grandpa's girl. My grandfather was amazing though. But
Aw.
but growing up, I would have never saw these behaviors from my parents. Now I also can say, Natalie, that it's not to some degree it's their fault, but they only knew what they knew at a young
Mhm.
age of 18 and 19 of getting married, right? They only
Mhm.
knew what they knew. But for me, what really was the aha moment was when I was talking with my kids one time and they were in high school and I said something to them, and they like asked me to do something. They're like, "You sound like Grandma and Papa." I was like, "Ooh, that was like a trigger for me, right?" I was like,
Uh-huh.
so at that point, I was like, "Okay, I want to have a conversation without being triggered." So we came up with a word, a code word. So if they felt like I was sounding, because my parents could not be grandparents. I'm like, let them get in trouble. Let them go break a knee. I don't care.
Uh-huh.
Let them go have fun with you. Like that's what I'm looking forward to someday. But they wanted to parent. So I just said to my kids, and we came up with the word buffalo. So if they
Uh-huh.
had something on their mind that like was, they made them feel like I was talking like my parents, they could just say buffalo. So it didn't trigger me. And then what it did, it created conversations. Hey, what
Mhm.
about that made you want to say buffalo? So it took
Mhm.
out the person that was a trigger out of the conversation, and we could have a conversation about that. And today, I
Mhm.
mean, my son, my oldest one, would go have sushi when he wanted to talk. My younger one would go do movies and things like that.
Mhm.
So it's been an eye opener for me to understand and help my clients understand we don't pick our parents, we don't pick our family. We love them, but you can put boundaries around family, friends, whatever it
Yeah.
does, because you've got to come first.
Absolutely, 100%, absolutely. And I love how you connected. You kind of took my thought to the next level because you're right. When you show up in these spaces as a little freer, like you feel like you've been set free, people don't always respond positively to that. And so that's where the boundaries really come into play. And I one of the big struggle I have found, and I don't know if this is the case too when you're coaching your clients, but in our therapy sessions, I feel like my clients have been really good at after some sessions identifying the need for a boundary and then also setting the boundary. The problem lies with following through with the consequences if the person that we're setting a boundary with doesn't respect that boundary. And I think that's where they find themselves feeling very frustrated because they feel like they've done all this work to learn about their needs and what they feel like would be right for their life. And then when a loved one doesn't respect that, then it's really difficult for them to say, okay, well, because of that, then I'm going to have to do X, Y, and Z, whatever that is. Whether it's pulling away a little bit, it might be like what you just said, like completely pulling away. And you mentioned writing the mock obituary. So I think that's the struggle sometimes that we have is just following through with the consequences. And I think that's the case no matter, I mean, even with parenting, let's say, like that might be a good example of where that also happens. But and I think that's where we have to pull back and reflect a little bit and ask, like, okay, so I've done the work, I've changed, I've seen the response that my loved ones are giving me because of that. I now realize the need to draw the line in the sand. I'm going to draw it, but if they step over it, why is it that I can't follow through with the consequence of that? And so, and that could be for various reasons, and maybe there's something internally that we're still struggling with as an individual, whether it's the people pleasing or sometimes people are really good at like putting their trust in who they hope somebody will be one day versus who they are actually right now in reality. So they live in this kind of fantasy world, and so they're always hoping that this person next time will respect their boundary. And so they keep giving chance after chance after chance after chance. Some people are afraid of change, and so the idea of like distancing themselves from this person that's been a part of their life for so long feels very scary. So I think that's where we have to take a step back, do some self-reflecting, figure out what needs to change within me that would then help me be a little bit more consistent with really holding people to these consequences.
I like how you tie that together too, because you try, like you're talking about, you want them, why can't they just be this way? Like, why can't, and we have to also understand that it's in their DNA. That's how they are. They unless they want to do the work, they're not going to change the work. Like in my situation, both my parents don't want to do the work, but they'll talk behind the scenes to everybody about, she this, she that. It's like, but I can walk in confidence. It's, knowing that I've done these boundaries, and it's made a big difference. I started late in life. Now I didn't start till I was like in my late mid 40s,
Mm-hmm.
like to really recognize. And because of that, when I look back and really do an audit of my life, and that's why I do this show, because I want everybody to know it's never too late to start. It's never too early to start. And it doesn't matter how old you are to start. And that's why at my retreats, that's why I love, especially when my midlife women come that are about to
Mm-hmm.
retire and they're like, oh my gosh, I've been working for my job, I'm doing for my kids. Like, stop, because we're not promised tomorrow. We don't know what tomorrow's going to come. And so, yeah, we keep hoping, trust me. I mean, even as like Mother's Day comes up and Father, I'm like,
Mhm.
I would love, my parents were with me when my kids were little. They were great. They were great, but some things changed in them, especially with their divorce. It's like, I shouldn't have to be pulled sides, and you need to respect that I'm a woman, I have my
Mhm.
voice. I'm not the little girl that gets told to sit in the corner to be
Mhm.
quiet, and so I have that expectations. Plus, I want to raise my kids to have that kind of relationship with their wives. So I wanted them to be like,
Mhm.
have a conversation, be open. People laugh at my husband and I. Like, my girlfriend lived with us after the hurricane season. She just got her
Mhm.
own place, thank God. Michelle was so happy to have her place, but she was here. She laughed at Chuck and I. Like, we do this banter back and forth. It's just fun.
Mhm.
But I have to tell you, when I met him, communication, I didn't know how to communicate. I did exactly what my parents did. Shut down, be quiet, don't talk to me. And he was like going, I can't fix what's bothering you. I don't know what I did that's bothering you. And so finally he got tired of me not sharing. So he tried to have the conversation for me. And I would be like, that's not what I would have told you. And it's like, oh, you have a voice. And so he'll take it to this day. Like, it's his fault. I have a voice now, but I also tell him, I go, no, it's more of you helped me see
Mhm.
what it is to have a voice, and I had great in-laws. I mean, really, when I met my husband, like I said, into probably the first 5 years, I met my husband at 19. I got to see what it truly was like to be parents. And my in-laws, they had tough times too, but I got to see communication, I got to see love, I got to see what that looked like. And so that helped me start having communications with my husband. And then also doing all this work, like
Mhm.
I said, I took that identity destiny class. I'm like, I still didn't know who I was in 6 weeks. I'm like, I need to figure this stuff out.
Mhm.
And growing up, Natalie, I hated my name. My maiden name was Nat.
Ah.
I was like, I was short, so Pearl Harbor, Pearl Bailey, go take a nap, mini Pearl, all this stuff I was called. And I used to come home, I don't want my name. And my name's 3 generations old. And my mom's like, you're not changing your name. And I'm glad she never let me do it, because now I love my name. Now I figured out who I am inside. I figured out that I have to put me first to show up, but to what I want to in my relationships. And I tell everybody there's a lot to be said. The quote about overflow your cup first is 100% correct.
Mhm.
And if people think it's a cliche, and like my clients, or if you're listening to us today and you think, oh, it's just a cliche, I'm telling you, you start putting boundaries on and things start showing up in your life that you
Mhm.
weren't taking this opportunity because you were going to go help this person or do that for that person. And so
Mhm.
I love that. I love that we had this conversations today. And look at our time is fly by. This is such great conversation.
It's been so good. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's been really good. And I will say one more thing really quickly
yeah, go
because you
ahead.
just based off of I love the story you shared about your husband. I there are some we're talking a little bit about some of the struggles that come whenever we make some changes and stuff relationally, but there are some beautiful things that can come out of that too. And I always say that relationships can be a very restorative process if we allow them to. And so as we begin to kind of change, we have the ability to model for the people around us what it's like to live. I like to say, just live a little freely. And if they're not receptive to it, then okay. But you find people that are. And I feel like when a relationship, when there's healing and there's movement and it's a reciprocal relationship, it could really be a restorative process. So to see how your husband, was able to help you find, like he said, find your voice, and I'm sure there's so much more to that than him just like having these conversations with himself, these monologues. But yeah, I think that's essentially what it is. There are some beautiful things that come out of when we decide to make these personal changes.
Yeah, I love what you talk about too, because I've so like when you talk about the modeling, like when I would have these conversations, my dad, unfortunately, there was no going back. I mean, he became racist towards my son. He did a lot of things that I wouldn't accept from anybody else, even if they weren't my parents. So it was like there was no going back. And he said, some other hurtful things after our son passed. But with my mom, I try to model it because I know, like, she grew, she was married to my dad. Some of the stuff she learned from being married to my dad. My dad was a gaslighter, he's a nurse, all these things that he did. And, so that was a habit she learned all her life as well. Where, for me, my husband taught me communication. He taught her the opposite, how to, and
Mhm.
so I've always tried to be that model. In fact, when she would tell me, even in my late 50s, I'm your mother, you can't talk to me that way. I'd be like, And I'm your daughter, who's also a woman who
Uh-huh.
deserves respect, you know? So this is, if
Mhm.
we're going to have this relationship, we have to understand we both come from now a place that we're adult women can have adult conversations. You're still my mom and I love you. And as much as you deserve respect, I deserve respect. But she
Mhm.
can't, you know, unfortunately, you know, she's not in that spot to do the work and she doesn't want to do the work. And so boundaries it is, you know, and yeah, I mean, you try to model it and you pray and hope. I mean, you know, every night I go to bed and pray and hope maybe they'll make that phone call. Maybe we can work on it, but I'm no longer going to be the one to do the work first because every time I have, it just comes back and the bound. Like I said, if I open my gates, they don't want to play by the rules, and I know what I want. I know where I want to go, and you know, people tell me like I'll say I was 60 years old, and people go, "You don't look 60," and I look back and I know the way I look today is because how much I love myself. Because when I
Mhm.
look back and I love my mom to death, but I see all the pain and everything. I look at pictures of her at 60 because I'm like, well, my mom doesn't look like this. I see how much of the pain and the stuff she carried from that relationship with my dad that I was like, I feel sorry for her. I feel sorry that she didn't have anybody in her world to help her do the work like I've done, you know, and that's all I would want for her. Anybody that's listening, I want you, you know, we talking this today and doing these conversations is I want women and even men, if you're listening to us, the same thing applies to you. Understand that you have to put yourself first. You have to overflow your cup because when you don't, you're just in rooms like we're talking about, showing up for the way people think you should show up for them.
Mhm.
But if you show up in a room the way you want to show up for yourself, you're going to clear the room, and
Mhm.
only the people that want to be there to support you in that are going to be
Yeah.
in that.
Yes. Oh, beautifully said. I love that.
Thank you. So Natalie, I want everybody to know, like, how can they reach out to you? How can they find you? Share all that. We'll also put it in the show notes as well.
Sounds good. Yeah. So it's very creative. It's the Natalie Rosado on all of the social media platforms. So that is my handle. And my website is also thenatalierosado.com. And yeah, feel free to reach out to me, send me a message, DM me, and I'd love to continue the conversation with them.
I love that. All right, so now everybody knows that at the end, before we close out our show, we do this fun little thing. It's our cards called Better Questions, Better Life. My friend Carol and her friend Diane, they create, there are over 70 cards. You pull a card every day and you basically, you can meditate on it, journal on it, take a picture, put it in your phone, whatever. So I'm going to shuffle the cards. You're going to tell me when to stop. We're going to have you answer your card. So here we go.
Okay.
Tell me when to stop.
Stop.
All right. Yours says, what am I grateful for? What are you grateful
Oh,
for?
I love that. I would say, this is the first thing that comes to mind. I would say that I'm really grateful that I have a father, and by that I mean I love my human father. He's great, but I have a heavenly father who created me exactly the way that he wanted me to be, and in the midst of all of my flaws and mistakes and mess ups, he still loves and adores me. So.
That's so beautiful. I love you said that because that's so true. That's why that's what led me to my journey too, is you know, he's already got the plan for us, so we just have to trust it, you know, and I
Mhm.
love that you share that. That's so wonderful. And he really is. He's the one who, no matter what our flaws are, he loves us anyways, you know. So I think
Yes.
that's so beautiful. Well, I thank you for joining us today. Thank
Thank
you for
you.
following along and coming aboard. I'm so glad I met you at Bloom Girls. I'm so excited to see some of the things that will come from that. But I want to remind everybody to like and share below on if you're watching us on YouTube. If you're listening to us, share out our recording to everybody you know, post it on social media, and tag us. And if you want to work on some of these things that we talked about, down below there's a link. You can make a call with me, give you a 30-minute free mini session. We'll talk about some of the things that bring you joy and how you can start showing up in rooms for yourself and not for others. And so with that, I just want to remind everybody that you are this beautiful oyster. We have rough stuff on the outside we have to work on, but once you start cracking up in that shell, you're going to find your own beautiful inner Shiro and your inner pearl of greatness. And I hope you go out today and do that. Have a great day. Gosh, you guys, was that not such a great episode? I just love Natalie. I knew when I met her here in Tampa, we were going to have so much fun when we got together on the podcast. I'm so glad that Natalie finally made it on. But, you know, what I take from this conversation today is like we were talking about, how are you showing up in the rooms that you're going and attending? Like, are you showing up in rooms the way people are expecting you to? Are you showing up as that people pleaser and just, yeah, I'm going to be there because they want me there? Or are you showing up because you want to be there because it's something that you will gain something from, but you can also give something at the same time? Like, really think about it. we set boundaries as we were talking on the episode, and the boundaries are not so much just for us, but also for those we have to set the boundaries around. And they do. They try to break the boundaries. They try to unlock the fence to come in. And it's okay if you want to let them come back in and see if they can honor what your boundaries are. However, what's not okay is when you start bending your boundaries or breaking your boundaries just to make them happy. And so that's what I want you to take away from this today is like, show up in the rooms that you want to show up with in the radiant way you're meant to be. And if you struggle with that, I get it. I've been there. I understand. It's hard to set yourself first when you're a people pleaser. It's hard to let go of things you think you have to control because of how you grew up. So if those are areas that you want to start working on, if you want to identify what brings you joy and start working on those things that bring you joy instead of on somebody else's joy list so that you show up in the rooms the way you want to show up, I would love to help you. All you have to do is click the link, as we said, that's down below and take advantage of a free call with me. And I can share a little bit more about our Shiro League if you want to learn more and just be with a group of women who show up in the rooms where they want to show up. But they're working on that because it's not always 100% easy to do. So again, I hope you have an amazing day. I hope you enjoy this session. And I hope you go out and be the Shiro that you're meant to be. I hope you learn that you are strong, you are happy, you are empowered, you're radiant in your original self. You just might need to work on that a little bit. Have an amazing day.
Why'd it take so long to leave you in the rearview mirror?